webinar hosted by SOLIDWORKS. We're doing this today for northeastern area of North America. So this includes US and Canada. And I'm Joelle Guénette. I'm the territory manager for one of those, the wonderful territories in that area. And I welcome you to the call today. The topic for today is SOLIDWORKS Electrical, Streamline Your Designs. And this is a topic that is dear to me because I'm an electrical engineer. I will, however, not be the one presenting this today because I'm more on the sales side of things. I do have with me JP Emmanuel that I will be presenting in just a few minutes, and Michel Cloutier, who's the territory technical manager, who will be helping with some of the questions on the calls as we go through this. So welcome to the call, everyone. A few of the other things that are dear to my heart in all of this are topics that we're going to talk about today, which is design smarter. So love working smarter, completing tasks faster and more efficiently. So all things that that I strive for, and all things that we try and help our customers do on a daily basis. And that'll be the focus of today's topic. So hopefully you enjoyed the little video that we saw before. We do that as people are getting on. If you missed it, don't worry. We normally run it at the end again if you want to see it. Or of course you can find them on YouTube. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce JP. JP is, as I mentioned, a technical manager for us. He specializes or is focused on our electrical product at SOLIDWORKS. He has over 15 years of experience in doing schematic design, working for the United States Naval Submarine Service. So if you get to meet him, he's got great stories about living and working on a submarine, traveling the world and circling it many times. And then once he was done with that, he moved on to being a defense contractor for the Navy. So his experience in this is great. He's got the stories of the good, the bad, the if I had the proper tool, these mistakes would not have happened. And he gets to see the benefits, obviously, of working with SOLIDWORKS Electrical. So, and he's been with SOLIDWORKS for just a few years, joined the electrical team a few years ago, and has been instrumental in showing these wonderful solutions to a lot of people around the eastern US and Canada section of the world. So with that, I will go through just a few extra things. Sorry, before we do that, there's a few handouts on the right-hand panel of your go-to webinar window. You're free and welcome to pull those off. There's also just below that a chat section where you can type message here. This is where you can put in your questions. You can put them in French, you can put them in English. This is why we have Michel Cloutier there to monitor the questions so that if they come in a different language. But that's the extent, I think, of our languages for today. So, we'll limit to that. But please don't hesitate. Ask your questions as you go, and we'll come to them at the end if there's time. Otherwise, we will get to them, and I will come back at the end to close this off. So, without further ado, off to you, JP.
All right. Let's see. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. So as I get started here, I always like to start off with a quick little taste of humor on this Friday morning here. And what I have here is an image I found off of Google, but I think it best describes how an electrical engineer and a mechanical engineer conversation, when a mechanical engineer, I should repeat, right? I should start that over. When an electrical engineer is talking to a mechanical engineer, this is what I picture what the mechanical engineer is actually picturing in their head when that electrical engineer is talking, because a lot of times they really don't understand, the ins and outs of what's really going on in the electrical space. So I really enjoy seeing that we have the flux capacitor in this schematic right here. So the typical design process that we have, and not just in SOLIDWORKS Electrical, but any CAD package, is we have to go in and we're going to go ahead and drop in symbols or draw our symbols, add lines or wires, and then we're going to drop in text boxes or fill in specific data fields for those parts. And then what I've seen, and I'm guilty of it too, is I've gone ahead and I've documented all my information, and it's typically done outside of the software. It's not done within our CAD package, in our schematic. And then finally, we have to go back in and we have to audit or second check that package, which, is time consuming, but it's typically required. Sometimes even a third check is required. And what I have seen is that it's this vicious cycle that never really ends. It just keeps going. Sometimes there's another revision and we have to run through this entire process all over again. So what SOLIDWORKS Electrical allows you to do is it allows you to take a lot of that back end information and bring it up front during your design process. So while you're dropping in your symbols, you're adding specific information. That way you don't have to sit there inside of Excel for the next several days making sure your bill of materials is correct. The next piece is the key factor. No pun intended with that keyed Glen Air connector that we have at the bottom of the screen, but the library is really the meat behind a lot of what we do in SOLIDWORKS Electrical. And case in point, our manufacturer part here, we have a lot of different ways we can represent that one particular part. And we'll see this as we go through this presentation today. And in this case, I have a line diagram, a detailed schematic, a 3D symbol, a 3D part, and we also have a 2D footprint. And if I make a change to this manufacturer part in any way, it will reflect on those attributes within those symbols throughout our schematic. So the way I like to describe the software and the way I like to use it is by breaking it down into wires, cables, and also into harnesses. That's just another image that we don't want to see this, right? Where we want to try to clean up our process a little bit, try to avoid something that might look like this. This looks like a maybe a high school or a home project that somebody might have done just to get the project out the door. So what we're going to expect to see today is we're going to go ahead and work on our electrical and mechanical collaboration. I'm going to show how the 2D and 3D side really communicate. We're going to work on some of that intelligent functionality. I'm going to show how that, again, that communication back and forth between the electrical and mechanical space. And then finally, our project deliverables, the thing that we really need to actually capture out of all this, why we're creating all these schematics, is to capture our reports. So again, we'll start with our communication and collaboration. We will jump into our line diagram and talk about our line diagram symbols and how those may help you, as well as our detailed schematic. And then we'll talk about our wires and how they're not just lines anymore. So I actually have SOLIDWORKS 2018 up and running, and we can see this is the assembly that we're going to be working with today. But I want to talk about the mechanical side first. I'd like to bring this side up real quick and just talk about how the communication between the electrical space and the mechanical space happens. And what we have is this project manager. This is where all of our electrical projects are housed and where we can communicate to that mechanical space. And we can see that these are all the projects I have on my computer, and the ones that we have in blue are the ones that I have open individually. And as we can see, I have this one particular project open. That's this chassis that we have with all these boards in it. But more importantly is our project document tree that we have on our electrical panel on the right-hand side. Now we take a quick look. We can see that I've broken this out into a lot of different folders, and this is totally customizable. So if you prefer to have several different books in different locations with folders, with subfolders, with even more subfolders, you can do that as necessary. The nice thing with this is that I can go ahead and review from the mechanical space the progress being made on the electrical side. I can't edit from this side, but I can at least see what's going on and maybe get an idea of where these parts are supposed to go and the names of these parts. But my other favorite feature in this software is the ability to actually embed a spec sheet. Oh, showed up on my other screen. Let me drag that over. Embed spec sheets right into my project. So now when I have a PDF or a spec sheet that I need to actually associate to a specific project, I can embed it in the project so that way everybody has access to it. Now if I go on vacation and now it's on my computer, somebody else doesn't have to suffer to try to do their configuration tool through Amphenol to get the actual part that they need. You do it one time, put it in the project, and everybody has access to it. All right, so let's jump over into the electrical space. Open a fresh install of a fresh instance of SOLIDWORKS Electrical, and the first thing that we see is that project manager that I just mentioned. But notice this time our project that we're going to be working with is in red, letting me know that somebody else is already working on that project. Again, another instance of that communication and that collaboration. It's opening up that window, letting us know that, hey, if I open this right now, somebody else might be affected by what I change. And we can see at the end here that I have other connected users. Yes, that's me because I'm working on my own computer, but in a network situation, I could have several users working on one project. And if we also take a look on the left-hand side, we have the same project document tree that we saw just recently in the SOLIDWORKS mechanical space and the 3D space. All those same files are there. And if we notice as well, there's that one file that shows up in red. That is our assembly that I already have open in the 3D space. So let's go ahead and work with what is called our line diagram, or sometimes called a block diagram. Now, our line diagram is, I like to use it more of a high-level document. I don't really necessarily need to put all the nitty-gritty detail that my socket junction modules or my power supply actually have, but it's a good idea to maybe build something like this that I can send off to my customers, or even pass up the chain to my boss or my superiors to say, hey, this is what we're going to use. This is the process that we're going to actually set these components up in. So now everybody has a good picture. Again, that communication collaboration extends beyond just the electrical engineers. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to add a new socket junction module. Now, I could go to my library and find a specific part. There's a lot of different parts I have in my library. They're all classified, and these are customizable. You can change the names or add new instances now with 2018. But for all intents and purposes, just like other CAD tools, what I can do is simply use the old trusty Control-C, Control-V, and drop that into place. But the nice thing with this, if you notice, is that it did not overwrite my mark or my tag for this particular part. It added a new instance to this part. So now in my bill of materials in the back end that we haven't looked at yet, I have T3 and I also have T4. So instead of having just 3 modules, I have that 4th one, and it added it for me automatically. So let's go ahead and connect that just so we show that it's connected to our power supply. And just like that, we've added it to our line diagram. So let's take this a step further, and we will work with our detailed schematic. That same symbol, we need to add that to our schematic. Now, I could go in and copy paste again. Let's go see if I can find it in my library. Again, I have all those same fields, those same classifications set up in my terminal strip, and this time I found it under my terminal strip drawing, or my terminal strip symbols classification, and I will simply drop that into place. Now, when I go to drop this into place, instead of creating a brand new part, I want to simply associate this to that existing T4 that we just added. And I'm going to find T4 in my project and simply select OK. Now, one other thing I'd like to do is actually go ahead and change this module name from 24 to common, just like that. And if we come back to our schematic here, what I would like to do is actually go ahead and review other instances of this project, other instances of this symbol throughout my project. So in order to do that, what I would do is just simply say go to. It's kind of like a hyperlink between my different symbols. So now I can see all those different instances in my project, as we see there. Now, this is a really good, this is a small example, but another, a great way to describe this even further is, let's say I have a 30-pin connector or a 50-pin connector, and that 50 pins, I don't know about you, but I in most cases, I've never been able to actually get all 50 pins on one sheet. 2 pins on one sheet, 10 pins on another. Maybe I'm separating my power pins, 3 line, neutral, ground on one sheet, and all my comms on another page. Now, if I make that change, or if I have multiple symbols associated to that one that one symbol, that one manufacturer part, I can use that go-to feature, and I can quickly go from symbol number 1, symbol number 2, and it's a lot easier than having to open every single one of my sheets and try to find those manually throughout my project. And if I make changes to that part, let's say I do have 5 or 6 symbols associated to one part, I can make that change and maybe change that from a 50-pin to a 60-pin connector. It will reflect on all of those symbols and all that information within those symbols. Now, one other thing that we have here is we have all these wires on our sheet instead of just lines like other CAD tools have in different layers. What we have is a lot of metadata built into these symbols. Again, they're not just lines, they're not just a color and a line type. We actually have a lot of other information associated to it, specifically a formula, which we will get into and what that's for in a few minutes. But more importantly, what we have is when we connect to the 3D space, it will actually go ahead and route a 20 gauge black wire for us. It will know to route the specific diameter that I've set in this wire type here in my 3D space. And also, on top of that, if I've also added a bend radius for something like a fiber line or maybe a pneumatic hose, I would want to put a bend radius in here to account for that, because we don't want to crimp our wire and we don't want to bend our hose we don't want to have our hose bend in a wrong fashion. That way the pneumatics won't work correctly. So real quick, what we just covered is the communication and collaboration between the electrical and the mechanical space. We talked about that line diagram, as well as talking about that detailed schematic symbol and the communication between those two, as well as the wire attributes, which we'll see a little bit more of, and we're going to open that up to show a little bit more detail in just a few minutes. The benefits of this is being able to reduce our errors, of course, simplifying our operations, and save a lot of valuable time, because, again, we're opening up that communication between the electrical and the mechanical space. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work with our intelligent functionality. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the software, because it helps us get our jobs done just that much faster. And this image here, I always like to point this out. There are 3,000 conductors inside of this one cable. It's a transcontinental underwater cable. Imagine trying to wring that out with somebody on the other end, sitting there with your fluke on one end and the other. So what we're going to use is, again, one of my favorite features known as the macro capability. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to connect our sheets together using origin destination arrows. And then we're going to create a terminal block drawing without actually drawing anything out. So one of my favorite features, as I just said, is the macro capability. And what macros are is not an Excel spreadsheet macro, but I actually like to call them common schematics, something that I'm going to use over and over again. Something that is maybe not just in this one project, but maybe 10 projects or 15 projects that I have, or maybe just 2, but something that I don't want to have to redraw. Mainly because if we take a look at my power supply here, I have a power supply and all of its metadata. I have the connectors that it requires, which is the housing and all the pins, the housing for all the pins on this and this and this, as well as this particular power supply requires this special hub to actually create an output power. It's a safety feature in this power supply, and its connector and its pins, as well as all the wires. So I don't want to have to redraw all that and add all that metadata next time I want to use this in a project. Yes, I could go back to this project, copy, paste, and bring it into my new project, but that's only set for local use. If I want to be able to share this with any of my other users, I'd want to use what is known as a macro. And in order to create a macro, I'm simply going to highlight all the parts I want and drag and drop it over into what is known as my macros palette. I can give it a fancy name, and now it is available for me anytime I want to use it in the future. Not just me, but when I create this part, it's saving it to my database, my collaborative server. That means everybody that is using SOLIDWORKS Electrical with me also has access to that brand new macro that I just created with all those parts, all those symbols, all those wires, everything built into that. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the information as the same. And we notice here that, again, it did not overwrite. I have power supply 1, and now I have power supply 2. It added a new instance to my project. If I so desire, I do have the ability to change that and keep it as PS1 if I want to and show just a duplicate symbol to represent the same component. I can do that, but in this case, I kept it as its own variable. So now it has a totally new component in this project. I can drop that in as many times as I want. You're not limited to just one symbol or several symbols. You can actually do multiple sheets. There is a feature, if I highlight a few sheets on the left-hand side, that I can create a project macro. And now when I'm ready to use that project macro in any project, I can take that and drop that right into a future project. So if I have that notes page that has to be in every single one of my projects, I can take that, include it with several of the sheets that are always in my project, and drop that in every time. Another tip you can do is actually create a template, which we can get into later if we have time, is another way to add all these sheets right up front, right when you start your project. It's a great way to get started really quick. So now that we've shown the macro feature, we have to connect a few of our wires, particularly these two, to its opposing end. We don't have, they're obviously connected to another sheet somewhere. So let's go ahead and find that other sheet first. So we have this tool here called the Origin Destination Arrows Manager. And I'm going to go ahead and find and have two sheets next to each other so I can simply connect these two sheets. And we have our single board computer and this battery, and we're going to go ahead and connect these up. Now I'm going to select the yellow wire, and if we notice, as soon as I bring it over to my other sheet here, it's not letting me connect to the black wire. It's refusing to let me connect to it because the metadata built into this part is not the same, or the metadata built into the yellow wires are the same. They're not the same with the black and yellow, so it's only going to allow me to connect those same wire types. It's helping me prevent any type of operator error. Perfect example is when I used to do a lot of schematic design, I would, last minute, hey, draw this schematic out for me. I need this real quick, and I would use one wire type or one layer to draw all these out, and then I'll admit it, there's probably been times where I've cross-connected something by mistake because it's just I'm in a rush and I'm trying to get things done. This helps prevent that from happening. So I'm going to go ahead and select those. And just like that, I have my origin destination arrows. Now the nice thing with this is I can simply double click it and it takes me to the opposing page. So that happens with any single one of these, that it will take me to the opposite page of where that wire is connected to. The other really nice thing about this is that when I export my project to a PDF, all of my origin destination arrows are also hyperlinked in that PDF. So instead of handing somebody that giant 500 page, or what it maybe it's 10 pages, that 11 by 17 book that they need out in the field, if they have a ruggedized iPad, they can find it from point A to point B really quick, rather than having to sit there and trace with their finger and find point A to point B and what sheet this goes to and so on and so forth. It just helps get the job done faster and more efficiently. So now that we've gone ahead and done our wires, our origin destination arrows, let's go ahead and we will add let's see if I can find a good sheet here for this. This one's good. I'm going to draw a terminal block. So in order to draw a terminal block, such as we would have in the big cabinet, we would go to our Insert Terminals feature at the top here. Now we can draw one at a time, or in our case, what we're going to do is draw several of them in one spot at one time. So I'm going to use Insert End Terminals. And what we need to do is simply create a symbol. And just like that, I now have a terminal block in my project with all new manufacturer parts, as well as a lot of extra detail that we can pass on to maybe the guys on the shop floor, the integration floor, or a subcontractor that's helping us build this chassis or cabinet, whatever it may be we may be working on. But the nice thing with this as well is that I can take this information, I can add even more detail to this. Let's say I need to have one of these terminals has to have a level. I can define different levels for these parts. I can also add accessories such as our end caps to these parts as necessary. So there's a lot of extra information we can add in, and by adding these extra accessories and by associating manufacturer parts to this, they're all being incorporated into our bill of materials. That way we don't have to work in Excel later on. But my other favorite thing with this is that I can go ahead and draw this terminal strip out without actually drawing anything. Instead of having two screens side by side and trying to look at my schematic and drawing an entirely new sheet, I can simply select this button here, and on the left-hand side, we'll see a new sheet appear in our document tree. So it's pretty general right now. It's a pretty basic drawing. However, there is a lot of information that we can capture with this particular terminal block. Case in point, we can actually configure this drawing to show cable information, or more importantly, make this a little bit bigger for everybody. How about this? More importantly, we can now show, based off of our schematic, our terminal, our wires coming out of those terminals, turning into a cable, coming out of that cable back into wires to the connected component. So right off the bat, we're taking and creating this entirely new document without actually creating and drawing anything out. And it's a great way to communicate our schematic design to, again, our subcontractors, our shop floor, our customers who might need this for troubleshooting downstream. So again, I think this is a great tool that a lot of people can take advantage of as they move forward with their designs. So real quick, we covered that macro feature. Again, that's probably one of my favorite features, and I see every day I see new customers. I've had a couple customers thank me for showing them how to use that feature, because it's saving them so much time on the front end while they're doing their design, because they don't have to go back and find an old project and try to copy paste, or the new project, they just kind of replicate what they did and nothing looks the same as what they've done in the past. Then we've gone ahead and we did the origin destination arrows, and we created a terminal block drawing. A lot of benefits for this is eliminating a lot of manual steps, simplifying our operations, and of course increasing our visibility by creating these new types of documents. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start working with our 3D space, to start showing that communication and collaboration again, and how we can get our wires actually into our project. And I call this that engineering moment, where we can actually understand how the electrical side is communicating to the mechanical space with our 3D connection points. And then we're going to go ahead and we'll use some sketch lines and we will route these in. So back on the 3D side, I know every time I have a meeting, I have a couple folks on the phone. I'm the electrical guy. I really don't want to have to dive into the 3D space. Well, quite frankly, it's really not that hard. This is pretty straightforward. And what we get is our same component tree that we have on the electrical side. So with this, I'm going to simply go ahead and associate our part from our component tree to an existing part in our mechanical space. So the mechanical engineer has probably already gone in, found all these parts, made everything up, but he may not necessarily understand, okay, which one is J1, J2, P1, P2, so on and so forth. It may be the electrical engineer's responsibility to come in here and check that. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and simply say associate. Now, you do have two options. Before I just say this is the only option you do have two options. You have insert, which, if you remember at the very beginning of my PowerPoint presentation, what we had was that key factor. Well, inside those manufacturer parts is a field, a directory pointing to a specific part, a solid part in our project, in our database, I should say. And when I say insert, it's going to find that part in our directory and it's going to pull it out and bring it into our assembly. At that point, we need to have smart mates set up so it will snap into place, or we simply use standard mating features and it will allow us to snap in. But for this purpose, it's already there. I'm going to go ahead and use the associate feature. I'm going to find the part I want, which happens to be this Molex connector right here. In just a second, there's a lot of parts in here. The nice thing with this, if you notice, all the other parts that are already associated to something are transparent. It won't let me select those parts. So it'll only let me select the parts that I have not associated to anything yet. I simply either right click or hit the enter key, and that's it. I've made my association. So as the electrical engineer, I'm confident that I know that that is, in this case, power supply 1 PS2, or P2, that's the plug 2 for this connector, for this assembly, I should say. So now that I've mated that up, or I've inserted that part, I should say, let's go ahead and take a look at some of our other parts. In particular, we have this socket junction module. And inside this socket junction module, we have all these little arrows here, which only takes about 2 minutes or so to set up, because I have a lot of them. But for a regular connector, I might have maybe just one or two. What these are, these actually connect directly to my schematic. So if we see here 0_0, that is actually pointing to pin 1 of my socket junction module, or in our case, pin A, socket A on this particular module. So in my schematic, wherever pin A is in my schematic, it's going to route directly to this particular point. So again, it's just showing that communication and collaboration between the two sides. So let's go ahead and actually route this up. Try to get a good view here so we can see everything. Now I have a couple different options. I have route my wires, I have route cables, and route harnesses. So for this case, I'm just going to turn all these into wires. I'm going to use 3D Sketch Route. It's a little bit faster, and I'm going to let the software do everything for me. So right now, what it's doing is it's looking at all those connection points in all my 3D parts. It's going to look at all those connection points I have on my 2D schematics, and it's going to go ahead and try to route everything for me. Now, this may take about 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute, depending on how many wires we have, but that is a heck of a lot faster than trying to manually route every single one of my wires to route my entire schematic. If you've ever tried to use the manual routing path features that we have in SOLIDWORKS, you can do it, but it will take you some time because you have to assign all this information and set up your splines and so on and so forth as you move forward. So let's let this go through for another second. I ended up hitting all wires instead of just selecting just a handful, so this may take an extra 10 seconds or so to do. I have a lot of different wire types in this particular project. Let's see. So again, I'm not touching my mouse. I'm playing with my mouse a little bit, but I'm not doing anything on the back end here. Again, the software is trying to manipulate this as best as it can. Now, when the wires do pop up, what we have is you'll see this yellow grid almost appear over the top of our assembly. And that is called what we call the EW path. It is a guideline that I've created as a 3D sketch that I've created to let my wires know, hey, I want you to try to follow this as best as possible. Because if you don't follow this, it's just going to go ahead and route wherever it wants, through everything, through a wall. So I've set this up so that it can try to follow and as best as I can. Let's see. There we go. So you can see those yellow lines appearing throughout my schematic. They're pretty straightforward to set up. I'm trying to move nice and slow so everybody can see that. But ultimately what we have, if we take a look at our socket modules here, especially our 5-volt lines here, we can see them connecting out through all of our project. It gives us a great way to represent, and at least with the sketch line, we can see how things are starting to route in our project. We may want to eventually go ahead and route full solid routes for every single one of our wires, but before we do that, which is a little bit more time consuming, I would recommend doing something like this and creating a sketch line, and you'll be able to create and get a visual of how things are going to route. I just had a meeting the other day with a company that is they're working on a module where the constraints are really small, and they really need to narrow down exactly where those wires need to be. And if a wire is not going to fit through a bulkhead, they need to know about it beforehand, so they don't have to take the entire thing apart to machine that hole a little bigger through the bulkhead. So this is a great way and a time saver to be able to get that correctly. So real quick, we went through and we associated that part. We went ahead and we looked at that communication or the connection points just to show how the electrical side is really talking to the mechanical space. And then I went ahead and routed those wires in 3D with our sketch lines. So a few benefits of this is, of course, increasing our visibility. Now, I say increasing visibility because if we do route these as a full solid part, a full solid feature, we could potentially use this in something like a brochure or just during a customer meeting saying, hey, this is what this is going to look like. Are you satisfied with the approach we're taking on this design? So again, it's another great way to communicate, not just internally, but externally as well. Simplifying our operations and saving valuable time. One other thing that I always like to mention too is, as the electrical engineer, you have specific design intent, specifically segregation of your wires, which can be done. You can separate your power versus your comms. And in some cases, you might want to show that by using the 3D route features to show, hey, all my power needs to go here on this wall, and all my comms need to go over here to help avoid any type of interference. So next thing we want to do is we're going to create our project deliverables. We're going to create some wire numbers first. We're going to generate our drawings, and we'll simply take a look at those drawings and see that we actually have some valid lengths in those reports. All right. So in the electrical space, what we want to do now is find a good sheet here. Let's go to, and we'll go right here. What we want to do is number our wires. Now, in the Defense Department, when I used to work for the Defense Department, we had to number our wires in a very specific manner. That was just what the military required. It all depends on maybe internally what your own internal requirements are, or your customer requirements on setting these up. But I'm going to go ahead and number my wires 1, 2, let the software do what it needs to, and I should have my wire numbers in just a second, just like that. So instead of sitting there going from point A to point B, or top of the sheet to the bottom of the sheet on all 50 sheets I have in my project, I can now create those wire numbers in a matter of seconds. And that information is coming from within that metadata built into that wire, not the layer, not the line, but the wire itself. So in this particular case, I've given it a specific wire numbering scheme to say I want this to be W001 and tell me what gauge it is and what color it is outside of this schematic for each one of these. You can design that formula for each one of these wire types to your heart's content. There's a lot of different fields and attributes and formulas that you can actually associate to this wire style. You can see here I have a specific formula for my equipotential formula, and that's what it's looking at to create that specific wire formula. wire number. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and generate our reports. So in our report manager, I've only selected a handful of reports, but there are a lot of different reports that we have available to us in our project or in the application. And these are customizable. There's a lot of different attributes that you can add or subtract from any one of these reports to create your own customized report. So what we'll do here is I have four different reports here. I'm going to simply select those, and on the left-hand side, we will see all of our reports being generated for us automatically. Again, it is taking all of that information that we've already put into our schematic, the power supply with all of its parts and housings and pins and all of our connectors and Amphenol connections, whatever it may be that we're working with, our PLC and all of its parts. It's taking all that information and dropping it right into these reports, so we don't have to sit in front of Excel for a week straight making sure we've ordered all the parts. And I can either conform or deny that myself, having worked in Excel, that I've forgot a part, and then I find out a week later that, oops, I need that part, and there's a 6-week lead time on it. So this here alone might help alleviate some of that pain. So let's take a look at these reports. So just like that, I have one of my reports, my bill of materials. And you can group these however you want. We have, in this case, I have my mark, I have the description, how many, manufacturer. I can always go ahead and add things like the vendor, DigiKey, McMaster, Mauser, whoever I'm getting my parts from, Newark. I can add that in, and maybe even their part number as well, because 9 times out of 10 theirs isn't the same as what the manufacturer calls out. So let's go ahead and take a look at our wires as well. And our to from wireless we have here is just the basic information. Well, again, there's more information we can add, but it's nice to see that we actually can capture the length for every single one of these. So in this case, for this particular, I'll go down to the 24-volt one here, I need 17 and almost a half inches worth of wire for this particular run. If we're in Canada, we might want to switch this over to the metric system, so we can switch that. There, you do have the option of having either IEC or ANSI, and we can switch that very easily based on a formula. But just like that, we've captured that information. Now, one quick tip on being able to capture the length. You capture the length after you route your wires into 3D space. Now, a few of you that I see on the call here on the webinar might have heard this story, but I love to tell the story because I think it fills. I think this application would be perfect for this one particular story that I have. So, as a defense contractor, I had to go and travel to Guam one time. So I live in Connecticut. I used to fly out of Providence a lot, and we would go from Providence to Japan, Japan to Guam, 26 hours travel time to get there, going to do an install on a submarine. Well, beforehand, we're getting all of our gear ready, and I had these huge containers of all this equipment, and my boss asked me to order a 60-foot RF cable from a specific company that the cable is extremely expensive. I want to say it's probably closer to 16 grand for this one cable, 16 grand for one cable, just because it's a long run and it's really low loss. Well, I order the cable, it's a 60-foot cable, we get all the way out to Guam, we start doing the install, and we get down to the torpedo room where we're installing all this equipment. And if you've ever seen Back to the Future, where Doc Brown is at the end of the movie and he's trying to connect the two wires together before Marty goes through the lightning bolt there, that was what it was like. We were about 2 feet short on our wire run. So if we had routed our wires or our cables inside of something such as SOLIDWORKS Electrical with the add-in for SOLIDWORKS Mechanical, we would have realized that, oh, hey, we need 62 feet. Maybe we should order a 62 or 63-foot cable just in case, and that way we don't run into any issues. I didn't get in trouble for that one, luckily. I got to go and hang out in Guam for a week and snorkel while we waited for a new cable to show up, so I can't complain too much about it. So real quick, what we did is we went ahead, I showed how to create those wire numbering scheme really quick, also generating our drawings, as well as capturing the length off of all those wires that we routed in the 3D space. So with this, we absolutely are saving, simplifying our operations and saving a lot of time and eliminating a lot of manual steps, because we're not sitting outside of something using something like Excel to generate these in a lot of manual data entry later on. We did it up front. We can utilize all that information and pull it out. So real quick, what we did over the course of this 45 minutes, almost hour now, is we created, we talked about that communication and collaboration between the two sides. We went ahead and talked about that intelligent functionality, that communication again, and the 3D space where we associated that part, and then we generated our drawings. In addition to this, I can't stress it enough that communication and collaboration, it's absolutely beneficial. It really does help. I've seen a lot of customers to date really open up that gap between the electrical and mechanical space. It increases our productivity, because with certain features like that macros feature, it helps us get our job done faster and overall streamlines our development. So I have a couple more slides, and then we have some time. I think we have some questions. But this tool here is SOLIDWORKS PCB. If you haven't seen it, it's really neat. What we have is the ability to take our sketch and our board shape, and we can create that board shape inside of the 3D space. We can worry about our standoffs and our keepouts, everything that we need to worry about for that initial board shape up front, instead of creating 5, 10, 7, whatever it may be, iterations of a board. We can do it one time, and we have that idea. And if any changes need to happen later on, you're already communicating to the mechanical space, and we have that. That's a separate package. You can talk to your sales rep about that. SOLIDWORKS PDM is another feature that we are working with SOLIDWORKS Electrical to be able to communicate better. There's a lot of customers out there already using that for all of our data, our revision control, and just overall control of our data. And now we're going to be able to start taking that information, all of our electrical information, and housing it within PDM as well. So there's always one last thing that I love to talk about is who else can I share my data with? You know, this whole presentation has been about the electrical and the mechanical team, but it's not just the electrical and mechanical team. Who else in our company as a whole can we really help create, our entire team help get the job done faster? And tools like Composer or Inspection or even Visualize for marketing, those are great tools to have, and you can take your entire assembly, drop it into Visualize, and make that project come to life without actually building a prototype. And one more slide I've got is SOLIDWORKS Electrical Design. We do have a lot of parts. This question always comes up as far as, do you have parts available so I don't have to do a lot of data entry? What we have is the electrical portal. The last I checked, there were a ridiculous amount of parts on this, 100 million parts or something like that on there. And they range from just having basic information to full-blown, all the metadata that you could possibly imagine inside of a part. So go ahead, take a look. It's actually free to log into that and check that out. With a subscription to SOLIDWORKS Electrical, you do get gold access to a lot of the parts that have a lot more that meat behind it, all that metadata. 3D Content Central, who wants to go in and reinvent a Ring terminal if you don't have to? You can go in there and probably download that, or Toolbox. And then mysolidworks.com, there's a lot of cool tips and tricks. The electrical side, I've been helping a lot with beefing up the electrical side. A lot of quick videos on how to generate reports, the best way to manage my my manufacturer part library, how to edit a symbol the right way. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks that maybe you've already gotten SOLIDWORKS Electrical and you took training 6 months ago and you forgot how to do certain things. This tool here with mysolidworks.com, search for SOLIDWORKS Electrical, and you'll find a whole bunch of videos that I've created that will help alleviate that pain moving forward. And with that, Joel, Michelle, do you have anything else to add?
There is one question pending, so if you want to tackle that, we still have a little time.
Sure.
So the question coming from Danielle asking, would it be possible to show how wire connection information is propagated between components through connector plugs and jacks?
So I don't have that set up right now. I can create a video, and Danielle, we have your email address in the registration. I will be glad to create a video for you and show you how to do that.
Okay, good. So we'll follow up with Danielle after. So there is another question from Simon. I'll translate as best as I can. So he's saying it happens a lot that we have to weld wires together. How to show that operation? Is it possible to test the concept or the design with animations? I think I can take that offline with Simon. I think we're gonna have to kind of explore some of the other tools. Maybe Composer could be a help for that, or some maybe Visualize if you want to do some animations or renderings. I think probably Composer would probably fit the bill for that type of instruction. I guess I think we're leaning more into instruction. So I'll follow up with you, Simon.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Sounds good. Well,
All
I appreciate.
right. Well,
go ahead, Joelle. I was about to steal your thunder.
No, thanks. I was going to thank you for all this great information. This was awesome as usual. This webinar was recorded. Here is a link to it that you can snap with your phone to access it. You will also get an email with a link, or the registration link that you used can be used again to view the recording. So please don't hesitate. Either go back to the material to see it to yourself again, or to share with others within your company or anywhere else. Obviously, this is free information, and go ahead and share with whoever you like. So just to come back, I'm sure that you'd like to take advantage of some of these benefits: smarter, faster, more efficient, automation for reporting, all of these great things that make your job easier and less error prone are all good things, and all things that owners of your companies may want to hear about if you can propose some solutions. So if you'd like some more information, don't hesitate. You can contact us directly, or of course you can contact your reseller. They're your local support. They're your local source of information. So I'm sure that they're going to be contacting you just to say, is there anything else that you would like? So that's your chance to go back and say, yes, I'd like to see more on this or that, whatever it may be. So please don't hesitate to take that next step and get other people in your company involved in seeing this, if that is the case and you want to take advantage of some of these benefits. Again, JP, thank you so much for hosting this for us this morning. We appreciate all the information. And with that, I will wish everyone a great Friday, and we'll see you on another webinar another day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.